mission comes from typically from solving a problem. And as an entrepreneur, it's really not hard because everywhere we look, we see problems and we start thinking about businesses and we think about ways to solve things. I think one of the things that happens is people don't think big enough. And then sometimes they hopscotch right into way too big without going through the process of building themselves into that space where they're capable of executing.
Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, and welcome to the Money and You Show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host, and we have a fabulous show for you today. Very, very interesting guest. I had a great conversation with him earlier and was so intrigued on he has many things he can talk about on the show today. So we're going to jump in, and I'm going to introduce you to Damien Lupo. Damien is a seasoned entrepreneur who has launched and grown over 70 companies from zero to $100 million throughout a remarkable 25-year journey. In addition to being a prolific author with 12 published books, Damien is celebrated for his extraordinary achievements in building multiple companies from the ground up, many of which have reached 7, 8, and even 9-figure valuations. Despite a significant setback that saw him lose a $20 million portfolio at the age of 30, Damien's resilience and determination led him to not only overcome homelessness, but also rebuild his wealth beyond 9 figures. Today, he's a driving force in transforming the retirement landscape with his groundbreaking retirement plan system and revolutionizing the home and apartment construction industry through his pioneering work with FrameTec. So we're going to dive into a lot of money topics today with Damien, and they won't just be money topics. They're definitely going to be life topics. So Damien, welcome.
So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Your story is really a tremendous one. Of course, I'm sure reading your bio, the first question is, well, how did he come back from losing that $20 million? So I don't know if you want to start with that, actually, and give us a little background on yourself and where you were at that time.
Yeah, it made me think, coming back to that, it was 15 years ago in 2008. And one of the things that when I think about that, I came back by allowing the healing process to take place. Whenever you lose, whatever you lose, whether it's 20 million or 20,000, if it's everything you've got plus more, and in that case, I went from 20 million to negative 5 million in 12 months because I was wrong about everything. And so it took years. I mean, how do you come back from, it's kind of like if you get injured, it takes time. You tear your Achilles, it takes time. You can't really force it because you're just going to do more damage because you haven't even figured out what the problem is. So I came back basically by saying, okay, I'm broken, I need help. And I went and found some really great people and did a lot of work on myself, which is the same thing that most people have in their life with their money stuff, whatever their money problems are. The solution is not going and getting more money. The solution is going and getting deeper into you. And that's what people don't want to do. They just want to win the lottery or make more money or hit a big win. And so when I went through that process and ended up being homeless, lost everything, all the money, the house, and the dog and the girlfriend, and it truly was a country song. Like I look back and I was like, I should have gone to Nashville probably with the story. and so ultimately on the other side of that, years later, asking different questions really came down to asking what is true, who am I, what am I here for? And what I realized is my previous answer to that question was I'm here to make more money. So whatever the money I was making it wasn't ever enough. And so I kept doing more and more. And I think God finally said, nah, wrong path, and took me to my knees. And on the other side of that, the question was, I'm here to have more impact. And ultimately what I learned from that was that when you focus on that mission that serves other people, the money takes care of itself. We just don't trust it long enough. Even if we do trust it, it tends to be for such a short period of time. We're not letting things play out the seasons. And so ultimately 15 years after that, everything has completely changed because I let go of needing and forcing all the hunting. And I kind of turned into more of a gardener, more of a farmer. And that's really changed everything.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And really, that's sort of the definition of the show, is that it really isn't about the money; it's about you, and figuring that out first before you can really have this sort of trajectory with money that's going to work for you. So, what were you doing early on that got you to that point?
So I was collecting real estate. I was doing real estate things that made money. I was buying and leasing out houses. Basically, I was effectively a landlord, and then I thought I was an invincible real estate baron. Probably I read too many of Donald Trump's books because his books sounded really exciting back in the 90s about becoming a billionaire with real estate. And so there was this obsession around the money and these big ideas. And I love big ideas, but the big idea was it was $1 billion. That was really the focus, instead of what can I do to disrupt or change or improve people's lives. And even though real estate involves people, oftentimes with houses, it wasn't the same thing compared to today, where the work I'm doing has a bigger impact on humans, and ultimately the numbers involved are categorically exponentially more. So it's funny, it kind of came full circle over the last 24 years, real estate into a place of real estate through some other things with the retirement system. But ultimately what it shifted from was everything was about me to everything is about other people. And I become a byproduct of how much I serve other people. And that's the big shift over those 25 years.
Wow. Okay. So tell us a little about what you are doing now.
Yeah. So today, what's happened over the last decade, it basically took about 5 years to get knocked down and get back up, because there's a period where you're really not wanting to get up because you feel like everything's going to hurt you, because that stove's hot, losing all that money and starting over. So about 5 years in, I looked out at the world, and what I saw was most people had no idea what to do with their money, and most people's future was really tied to their retirement accounts. And so I said, okay, well, as I dug into this space, I realized most people didn't really have a clue that they had a lot of options. And I dug and ended up writing a book called the QRP book. And it was about how you can take control of retirement money and not just hand it to Wall Street and hope and pray, but literally take control and invest and design your future. That's really where EQRP came from. So build this community with thousands of people that have EQRPs that control their retirement money, so they can go out and invest in real estate or Bitcoin or a Jimmy John's or really almost anything. And then a number of years later, realized that a lot of people had this control of this money, and then they really needed great deals. They needed great things to invest in, and by providence, some things came together. And I had a dear friend of mine from the late 90s that came to me and said, I have this really great opportunity. I'd like you to see it. And that was what FrameTec was. And so FrameTec was this idea that these guys had in Arizona to really disrupt the construction industry, which hasn't had much change in the last 50 years. The last thing that happened was like the nail gun in the 60s or 70s when that came to be. So these guys had this idea that there's a way better way of building housing and doing it in a very efficient way, very fast way, using some ideas to use technology and also do it without the waste. Because if you look at most houses, their apartments that are built, 92% are built with wood, and you just see literally dumpsters full of forests just being thrown away. Right. And the quality is kind of crappy when you think about people out in the sun and throwing boards up. And so this idea was to take that whole process, put it into a manufacturing plant and do it a lot faster, do it more technically accurate because it's in an encased environment inside of a building, and then do it using technology with a finger joiner, which puts boards together to where you reduce the waste by, get this, 99%. Whoa. So instead of 3 dumpsters full of wood, we have a little trash can full of sawdust, and that is effectively our waste. So FrameTec is this incredibly disruptive concept, and our plant comes online in a couple of months. We've been building it for just over 2 years. And so this is really changing what it means to build in America. And what's crazy is that we have this huge housing shortage, and it's because less and less people want to go out there and swing hammers in the sun and the rain and the snow. And we're destroying the environment because we don't have new technology. We're not thinking differently. So FrameTec really solves all these problems, and everybody wins except the old thinking. The old thinking has to die. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That is super impressive and exciting. So the buildings are built they're built off in a factory, basically. Is that kind of what you're saying? And then moved to a site?
Yeah. So what happens is, but typically when you think about, we do the bones. So FrameTech is very, very narrow. Our niche is we build the skeletons for houses and apartments. It's all the wood floors, the trusses, the walls, the wood ceilings, the trusses up there. And so we take these designs. Somebody gives us a design for a house or an apartment, and we convert that into our CAD system, and then we build all those pieces, and then we load them on our trucks, and our teams go out and put them together on site. So what happens is we take the framing chaos out of the equation for builders, and we say, okay, you want this house, give us your plans, and we'll give you, on this specific date, you will have this house framed, and then you can have all your plumbers and electricians and everybody else, all the other subs come in behind it. So it's very predictable. It also saves an average house that takes a couple of months. We do the entire process from design to having it framed in 2 weeks. Wow. So we were cutting off 75, 80% of the time. And that by itself, when you cut off time, it saves a ton of capital, and it's very predictive. You don't have to wonder when you can get your electricians and when you can get the other people to come out. You can say, okay, we can schedule everybody on these days. So everything gets a lot easier. And this is what the industry has been begging for forever, but nobody's ever taken the time. And quite frankly, the capital investment building this plant is going to be $60 million to build. So that was the fun part, bringing all the people together, the people that had the ideas, and then all this community that said, we want to be a part of this. We want to help fuel this. So the investors get to be a part of something really special. And now we're doing our second plant. So we'll cover about 95% of Arizona. And then we continue moving east to other states. And what this is going to do is it's really going to help solve the housing crisis across the country in a massive way.
Wow, that is so cool. I love that. So is most of the waste in that earlier phase where you're framing the house? Is that where most of the...
There's a ton. And when you think about the other stuff, there's always going to be things that you're going to trim. You're going to have, whether it's pipes or whether it's edges of things. But to give you an example, if you have, say, an 8.5 foot board that you need, you're going to take a 10-foot board and you're going to cut off 1.5 feet, and that's just going to go in the trash. And that's how things are basically done. You get these giant stacks of 10, 12, 14, 16-foot boards, and they just cut them. And they don't try to use those scraps, and there's not really a good way to use them. Our system allows us to have one continuous board through this patented technology where we use the finger jointer, which is a proven technology. We just took all of these processes and built them together and made something different out of the process. So that's basically where a ton of the waste comes from. There's always going to be waste when you're building something from packaging and such, but a massive amount of literally it's 40-yard dumpsters is the average 2,000 square foot house. Wow. And you think, I don't know how many trees that is. It's a lot. Like, I just planted a bunch of trees in my house. And I think what I planted here, we probably on an average house would throw away 5 times as many trees as I just planted. I planted a whole forest, it seemed like. Wow.
That is really something. So, yeah, I could see where this is like a heartfelt, really service-oriented endeavor for you. And, yeah. So, I mean, can you kind of reflect back on the difference in how this feels versus what you were doing early on?
Yeah, I think in the early on stages when there's nothing, there's this, we go into a primal state. I remember thinking more is going to make me happier. It's going to make me feel more safe. And I'm proving it to somebody else that, look, I have something. And the shift now is that there's this idea that serves other people, and all the other stuff got buried by that. Like, the mission becomes so powerful. There's this force that drives it. So mission comes typically from solving a problem. And as an entrepreneur, it's really not hard, because everywhere we look, we see problems and we start thinking about businesses and we think about ways to solve things. I think one of the things that happens is people don't think big enough. And then sometimes they hopscotch right into way too big without going through the process of building themselves into that space where they're capable of executing. So the difference back then is I was thinking big, but I didn't have any intelligence. I didn't have any execution intelligence. So I was making really dumb decisions without any experience. And here, 70 plus companies later, I've got a lot of experience, but more than that, I have a team. So the shift into understanding that there's a whole bunch of people that you need in your world if you're going to have a big impact, and then getting people that are incredibly awesome at what they do, that are world class. That was the big difference. Like, now I have a world class attorney and world class accountants and world class operators. Back then, I think half the time I was the operator, I was the accountant, I was the lawyer, which was not good. And so there's a shift, and it's all thinking. It's really funny. People think, well, if I just have a skill, or if I just get lucky with the money, but really you have to go through this process. And I think most people just don't give it enough time. they try to force the issue, and there's no way to force becoming a rich person. And rich is in your mind. It's like you talk about, it's this mindset, and it has to do with how you view yourself and how you view the world and what you believe your purpose is, more than your ability to do something real fast or real good or sell people. And that's what I was really good at. That was that shift back then that, fortunately, I'm not the person I was 20 years ago.
So interesting. What are some of the ways that you helped yourself to kind of heal and make this shift? I mean, were there authors or teachers or books, or, I mean, what did you use to kind of get over this hurdle?
Well, one of them was finding somebody that I trusted and respected enough to tell the truth and then be honest with that person. I think a lot of times we lie to ourselves. You can't fix a lie. So radical honesty and radical responsibility. There's a book by, I think, Brad Blayton, or it's called Radical Honesty. And I don't know if there's a book called Radical Responsibility, but it seems fitting. Owning everything. So back in 2008, when things fell apart, I look at it and I go, okay, yeah, did the world fall apart? The great financial crisis? Yeah, but what are the pieces that I did that I'm responsible for? And then owning those, not only saying, okay, I'm going to learn from them, but be willing to say, yeah, I screwed this up. I find that a lot of people that are trying to do things or pitching things aren't really very forthright in their blunders, and it makes me nervous. So that was a big part of this process, being incredibly responsible and owning my life. Larry Winget has a bunch of great books. I think he still lives in Arizona. And one of his books is called Your Life is Your Own Damn Fault. Shut up, stop whining, get a life. And it's really true, but we've become so sensitive to anybody saying anything that might hurt our feelings. The first thing we have to do is acknowledge that we're going to blunder a lot, and that's how you grow. And then saying, okay, well, that's okay. And I just think that over time, as kids, we were taught and basically pushed to not make mistakes as if they were bad. And I always laugh and I say, well, you realize that the baseball players that are getting 6 or 7 out of 10 wrong are Hall of Fame, making 20, 30, 40 million dollars a year. And in school, if you get 5 wrong, they kick you out. So it's really a shift and saying, okay, the mistakes are part of the process, and then falling in love with the process. Unfortunately, we get obsessed with this outcome and we forget about the entire process, which I think is where all the joy is. It's fun when you cross the finish line, but like all the training and everything else, if it's just for the finish line, you're missing your entire life. And that's what money is for a lot of people. They're just waiting for that moment. So now I trust the money that is going to happen. And I'm seeing it in such a big way for so many people that I've never seen before. And it's because I've let go of trying to force that. It's really owning the part that I can control. And that part is me. It's not the money.
Yeah, wow. That's so important and deep. And I think people don't think about money on that kind of deep level. They think about other relationships maybe, or other aspects of life, religion or something. But money can be a very sort of spiritual kind of journey in itself. And I think everything you're saying is really valuable. It's that whole mindset around money. I mean, can you tell us a little about kind of how you grew up and what sort of a mindset you started out with?
I think first off, the mailman probably delivered me, and it was very. It's interesting when there's an outlier in a family and people go, "Are you sure you're related to people?" Because they don't talk like you, they don't act like you, and I mean, I grew up in an environment where I was told we don't have money, and it was not just that we don't have money, but there was this guilt, like, hey, we don't have money, and if you're asking for things, you shouldn't be, because that's wrong, and wanting things is wrong. And so but what it did is just irritated me, and irritation with an entrepreneur means you're going to go create a business. It's like you can't help it. So I went out, and my first business was when I was 11, selling Nintendo games, video games, buying and selling them because I wanted to play games. And so it was like there was no way to contain. It's like a wild beast. An entrepreneur is sort of a wild beast, and really entrepreneurs are just people that solve problems. Sometimes it's their own problems. But growing up, there was definitely a lack. There was a disconnect around money. It was very hidden. It wasn't something that we talked about other than saying we didn't have enough. And none of that stuff really resonated with me. I think that I knew that there was something inherently wrong about this message, and then I realized that if you're hiding things and you're not open and you're not transparent, you can't fix it. So like I said earlier, you can't fix a lie. Well, if you don't even know what the problem is because you're lying to yourself, how are you going to fix anything? That's really what I grew up around, and it shifted as I got older, but it didn't shift immediately. One of the funny things, if I look back, was doing a lot of the same things, like not really owning the reality around numbers. When I first started real estate, I just went out there and did things real fast, and it was messy. And then I realized later, this has to be tight. It's one of the things I tell people when they're starting businesses: make sure you have somebody doing your books, not you. Because even if you're an accountant, you should have somebody else doing your books. Being clean about your numbers tells you a story. It's the language of numbers, money, and accounting is the language of business.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about investing or you're gonna do business, you've got to have your numbers straight. And I realized I was following those patterns like most of us do with our parents and how we grew up. We tend to do the same things. We model our parents. And then unfortunately, I see a lot of adults doing things and I'm going, oh man, your kids are going to do the same thing you're doing. And they're doing what their parents showed them. So this is where being conscious and having somebody that tells you the truth that you'll actually listen to is so freaking important. That was one of the mistakes I made. I stopped listening to other people around me when I thought I was the smartest person in the room. And ultimately I got flattened because of that. And it's very humbling. And I think it was important to go through that process and then realize, okay, I need to have way smarter people telling me the truth all the time.
Yeah, very interesting. And I love what you're saying about knowing your numbers, although what you're saying is a little different than that, because I'm always telling people to know your numbers. But what you're saying is let somebody else know your numbers because they'll actually see things that you might not see. Or, I think a lot of times, even when we are paying attention to our numbers, we can make a lot of excuses for them, and so somebody else might not do that. So
well, and to be really clear, knowing your numbers is critical. It's somebody else knowing your numbers. I'm just talking about the time people will spend. Even now, friends of mine that are talking about they're going through their credit card receipts from last year and they're trying to get all this stuff together for their accountant. They should know their numbers, but they shouldn't be the ones that are sitting there, I don't think, spending all their time when they're professionals, they're doctors, they're running a business, and there are reasons that people are bookkeepers because they are in their zone. Most people are not in their zone doing bookkeeping. It drains them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you get to abdicate responsibility and say, well, I have no idea somebody else is doing it. You still need to know what's in there. And there's this incredible power when somebody is great at that thing and then they share the stuff and they start giving you, here's the truth. Here's the trends. Here's where you're going. You're going off a cliff and you're like, oh, so it's absolutely knowing your numbers. It's kind of like doing your own lawyering. That never ends well. It's always good to have professionals doing things. You wouldn't do your own brain surgery. Yeah. So why are you doing your own accounting? It's like, these are things we don't think about, or typically we think, oh, well, I can do it real fast. And then the question is that what you are meant? Are you here to do your bookkeeping? Is that your mission in this world? Like, why God put you here? Probably not.
Yeah, totally agree. And for most people, that's not their zone of genius. It's not where they should be spending their time. But what I find is even, if you brought up a good point, I say know your numbers. That doesn't mean do your numbers. But people, the ones who do their numbers know them better. The ones who aren't doing their numbers oftentimes just, like you said, leave it to somebody else and they look at it around tax time and that's about it. So they're not using their numbers for any decision making. So it's an interesting thing.
Well, funny thing that I heard years ago, and it makes sense. It's really true. Most people get their numbers from somebody and they go, oh, look, we made money this month, and they go have a drink. Yeah. And then sometimes, oh, we lost money this month, and they go have a drink. So really all it is an excuse to go have a drink. And it doesn't really, and they don't know how it happened or it's like the outcome. So there's a big difference between engaging your numbers and just having them handed to you and you just move on. You don't really think about them. So there's an active engagement I think is incredibly important to what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you. That was well clarified. And so as a person who does use their numbers, I mean, what kind of decisions, what should, I mean, I've never asked this question before, but you're so smart on this. So, as an entrepreneur, look at your numbers, but what are a few questions you should be asking yourself when you're looking at those numbers?
The most important thing, I think, is to look at trends. Where are you heading? People say, oh, I made money or I lost money, but that doesn't really tell you much of the story. Like, you need to see where you're heading and are you heading in the right direction? Are you accelerating up or down? And that's one of those things that if you're going in the wrong direction, you got to stop. Like when you're losing money or you're digging, question is, do you have the wrong people? Are you spending money? Are you wasting them? Are you bleeding? And you're just ignoring it. And you think, if I work harder, I can fix the bleeding. And you might just speed up the bleeding because it's like you're not going to fix your losses because you sell in volume. Like that's like the joke around Walmart. Well, if we're losing money, we'll just make up for it in volume. That's not a good plan. And doing irrational things. I've done a lot of irrational things, testing things. One of the mistakes I've made is I've tested things in such a big way sometimes without seeing if there's any impact of the original thing. That can get you in trouble. And this is also one of the fun parts about being an entrepreneur and an owner. You can do crazy, dumb things and nobody's checking you. It's also incredibly stupid because it can easily lead to bankruptcy. And whether you're an owner or you're doing your life with your money, just asking yourself, like, what am I actually doing with the money? What is happening and what is the trend? And if I keep doing what I did the last 3 months in a year, okay, let's multiply that by 4. Am I going to be in a better place or a worse place? And quite frankly, most people are heading in a place where a year from now, they're not going to be in a better place. They might even be making more money in a year, but because of Parkinson's law, where you spend everything that you earn or more, and just these different things that we do unconsciously, not being real about what's going on doesn't give you a chance to actually fix and course correct. So having that reality check, and this is where it's really useful to have other people, whether it's it's a mentor or it's an accountability partner, or just having somebody that can say, okay, what is this? But it's like being naked. When we show people our numbers, it's uncomfortable because we're like, man, I should have gone to the gym more. Like you start looking at your numbers and it's a little embarrassing, which is why most people just ignore it and they go get another drink. So that's one of the things that can change your life is acknowledging the trend and then asking yourself, is this the trend I want? Instead of saying, well, when I win the lottery, it'll all fix everything. The reality is even the lottery won't fix you if you're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, for sure. And the lottery doesn't fix a lot of people. Most people who win the lottery don't get fixed. So yeah, that's great. I mean, really good information because I do think that's a big problem for people. They're busy, they're creating, they're building, they're doing whatever they're doing. That's where their heart is and their passion is. And looking at the numbers gets just pushed, but you're missing opportunities to make better decisions along the way. So yeah, super, super important. You had a couple of points here that we had talked about. You talked a little when we spoke earlier about using the investor's edge to turn mistakes into wisdom. Do you want to speak on that a little bit?
Well, one of the funny things is I think a lot of times people think that they can learn their way by studying something into avoiding pain of lessons and mistakes. And when you're investing or you're doing business, there's this incredible wisdom that happens only when you get burned or cut or stubbed your toe or whatever. And people want to avoid it because we don't like pain. When you get on a bike, you fall off and you don't die. But there's this like weird thing that we think we're going to die because of any mistake that we make, as if some tiger is going to jump out of the weeds and eat us. That only really happens if you grew up in Alaska like I did, or you go on safari and you decide you want to line up tiger cubs or something. Then you can actually be eaten by things in the bushes. But the reality is that it's incredibly important to become an efficient, effective, successful investor, business owner, somebody that's successful with their money. You have to learn how to learn from mistakes. Truly, that's where wisdom comes from, where your instincts will guide you. I don't care how many PhDs you have. I don't care how many books you've read. If that's all you have and you don't have the experience, you don't have a wisdom edge. All you have is a bunch of book smarts. But it's funny, but our guts tell us a lot. And a lot of our guts are from the emotional intelligence from going through things, and will help us avoid things and help give us the strength and fortitude to move through things that may be scary or hard or unpredictable, because we say, okay, well, I'm going to do this thing. And there's a 60-80% chance it's going to fail. And that doesn't mean I'm a failure. It just means I learned something new. So that edge is really about developing wisdom through the experience of doing the thing. And that's the people that are really, really free. And that's my mission, is to free people from financial bondage. That they're the ones that are free have gone through the thing. They're not the ones that showed up at 60 years old with $2 or $3 or $4 million and a financial advisor that says you can spend 4% a year. That's not freedom. That's terrifying, because you go, I hope I don't make a mistake, because if I do, I don't have time to go fix it. And so you're sitting there the rest of your life hoping you don't run out of money. Right. Whereas if you've gone through and you have this edge of the wisdom, you take all the money away and you can go create it again. So that's one of those things that it's not really taught anywhere. People just say, well, hand over your money and everything will work out, but you have absolutely no wisdom and you really don't have any security, regardless of how much money you have, especially if somebody hands it to you. And there's a lot of people right now that their plan for financial freedom is they're going to inherit money from mom and dad. That is their entire plan. There's a huge wealth transfer. It's trillions and trillions of dollars. And I've seen this over and over in my own family and many others. People get money and then they literally they get drunk on the money. They do incredibly stupid things. And so then they have no wisdom. They have no experience. That's what we need. And it doesn't matter how small it is. It matters that you have momentum and that you grow from it. So if you want to have that successful edge, you got to go do something and learn how to almost invite pain. It's kind of like going into a cold plunge. You know it's going to hurt, but you do it on purpose because then when you do it, everything else is easy. That's what Joe Rogan said that recently. And I was like, yeah, I agree. And I firsthand experience. It's like the hardest, most painful thing I do each morning. And I do it. And then the rest of the day is easy because I've already forced pain on myself. And now everything's a lot warmer and a lot cozier.
Wow. Okay. That's a great perspective on that. You bring up some interesting points because, I want to talk about the retirement thing because, you're right. I mean, that's most people's plan is to save and use their 401ks and whatever else. But for a lot of people, it's hard to see beyond that. I mean, you're talking about, doing some other things. It goes to a conversation about risk and how much risk can people take, how much can they stomach, but also how much is wise. I mean, you could take it to an extreme and just say, take every risk you can find and just, trust. But how do you kind of balance this out for people who are just uncomfortable with that whole idea?
I think a lot of the risk, this reminds me of some friends I have that are retired Navy SEALs operators. And I made a comment to one of them one time. And I remember his comment to me was, or I said, you guys are like, you have all this you're like fearless. You just go in and people are like, you're going to go and you're going to do this mission and people are going to try to kill you. And you just do this day after day. And he said, actually, the SEALs are a bunch of chickens. And I said, wait, what? And he said, yeah, we just train and we go through things so that we have muscle memory, but we don't like going into environments where it's unknown. We can adapt, but that is not what we prefer. We just train. And that's the difference where if you say, okay, I'm going to go train, then the risk is really, it's not the thing, it's about you. Mm-hmm. So it's money in you and you are the risky thing, not the money or not the investment. And when you start going through the thing and you train yourself, you become less and less risky. I can take the same investment house and take two different people and one of them will make it a great success. And the other one will completely blow up and lose a bunch of money. It has to do with them. It has nothing to do with the house. And so that's really what people have to embrace. But the difference is you can't blame if you say, well, it's about me, then that sucks because when it goes bad, it's about you. And if it's about the house or it's about the deal, it's about the stock that you bought, then you can blame them. You can blame whoever you want. And so there's this disconnect on responsibility. So risk and people being uncomfortable, it's mostly because they don't spend any time. And if you say, well, I'm just going to ignore it, then you can always blame somebody else and you never have to own your life. You can always say, well, I don't have any money because I have kids or I had this thing happen or I got sick or there's always a reason. Once you say, okay, it's up, if it's going to be, it's up to me. Once you go into that space, then the whole idea of risk is really about you shifting away from being a risky investor and being a more thoughtful investor. And that's the difference. There are some people that will never spend that energy or the time and effort to become a smarter, more efficient, less risky investor. And they probably should never take their money and go throw it at some deal. They should probably just have somebody else doing it because they're not taking responsibility. That's the single most important thing, taking 100% responsibility for the outcome. Mm-hmm. And even if you have a hurricane and it blows down your house, you're like, okay, well, how do I take responsibility for that? You take responsibility for how you react to it. So there's the radical responsibility changes everything in life because nobody can do anything to you anymore.
Wow. Yeah, that's big. So, okay. So do you have any specific, I'm trying to kind of pull this apart in my brain and see how much of this is education, how much of this is trial and error, so somebody's listening to this going, yeah, I'm going for it. Like, what's the process?
Well, the process is doing something that gives you, you're almost tricking yourself into something. So typically what I'll tell people is you've got to have two parallel paths that you're running. And these are classic things that came from everything from the Bible to The Richest Man in Babylon to Think and Grow Rich. You've got to eliminate debt, and you've got to build up assets that are paying you so that you're not just a slave to a system that's going to print money faster than you can ever earn it. So these two things happen. People, they get obsessed. They listen to Dave Ramsey and they go, I got to get out of debt, but then they never actually go and learn how to be an investor. Or some people they're investing, but they're getting destroyed with debt. Like I've been in these different camps. So you have to understand how to, and you got to practice. When you start investing in something, it doesn't really matter what it is, but when you get a little bit of feedback, you tend to get this like little greedy butt thing going on where you want more of it.
Yeah.
You get a little interest. You're like, ooh, that's cool. I want some more of that. You get a dividend. You get something happens. And so typically what I'll tell people is, hey, go start in something that you can control. Go buy an ounce of silver and pay down. And there's a debt snowball thing. So you pay off, you have a plan to get rid of all your debt, and whether it's 5 or 7 years, and you've got this thing where you're creating some assets. It gets people in this mindset to where they're not just hyper consumers. I think it's insane the way that after 9/11, our message from the president said, go out there and spend money and buy things. I mean, that's the solution. That's not the solution I get it for the economy, but truly that's what we've been programmed to go do that, instead of saying, okay, how do I go buy assets, and how do I stop being beholden to these institutions and places that are just, they're basically taking my energy, my future energy. So that's the stuff. And it's really not overly complicated. Once we start doing anything in that space, we tend to want to do more because it feels good. It feels good to kill debt. Like I purposely go get debt just so I can kill it. And I go buy assets because I like the feel of real things like gold and silver and real estate, and like FrameTec. It's a real thing. There's a very big disconnect with a lot of that stuff because it's all paper and it's smoke. And I mean, the amount of people that have shown up over the years and said, well, I think I have some 401ks from previous employers, not really sure how many or how much is in there.
Yeah.
Turns out they have $300,000 or $400,000 that's all over the place. Huge disconnect. It's like fake money. It's like monopoly. So the first thing is being really honest. Okay, what do I have? And then starting to put energy into growing that, and then killing the thing that's bleeding you. There's nobody that can't do that. There are plenty of people that won't do it, but that's a choice. So wealth is a choice. I don't care where you're from, especially in America. If you're in America, you have a choice. I don't care where you grew up. It doesn't make any difference. It's this choice that we're making every day. And when I see people focusing on Friday and football and beer, and that's their plan for after hours and on the weekends, I go, I know where you're going to be in 10 or 20 years, the same place, watching the same game, talking about 10 year ago football. And that's unfortunately where most of society lives. Instead of saying, okay, Friday night, I'm literally studying. I'm out there. I'm learning about something. I'm around people that aren't just getting wasted because their life sucks so bad. That's the big difference. The haves and the have-nots. The haves tend to go out there in general, not the trust fund babies, but the haves go out there and they go create because they're curious and they put the energy into things and they say, hey, it's not going to happen on its own. Like wealth doesn't just fall in your lap. As much as you watch The Secret and you can think away, it doesn't just fall from the sky. You got to go out and create it. You got to go plant those seeds.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I laughed, but I do like The Secret. But I do think The Secret falls a little bit short. I am a big manifestation proponent, but you do have to take some actions as well, and you have to be in that flow, but at the same time, you have to be getting the education and paying attention and working it. And I love what you're saying, because it's a lot of what I try to impress upon people is money is like a relationship. You have to pay attention to it. You can't just, let it go and hope that it's a good relationship. I mean, you have to spend time with it and on it. And people don't necessarily do that. As much as they want more money, money's not a big, just like you were saying, it's not a big, they don't schedule it on their calendar, to sit with my money and figure some things out and look at some things. And it's just not, doesn't happen.
No, people's relationship with money is that they don't understand the entropy effect. Like you have to put energy into things or they dissipate. That's in the universe. That is 100% of the case everywhere. Things break down. Whether it's a house, if you don't keep up a house, everybody's seen a house that fell into disrepair. It didn't get kept up, and it falls apart, and nature takes over, and it goes back to its original form, which is dust. And it's the same thing in relationships, like you're talking about. One of the funniest things that I've been saying for a long time, if you have a spouse or a partner and you think I'm going to have, like, people want to have this passive investing. They want to just have passive. They don't want to engage. They want to hand their money over. I go, cool. So you think passive is that actually is going to work. You ever tried to have a passive sexual relationship with your partner where you just say, okay, just, do me, like, you're not going to be invested in the thing. Like, you've got to be active. And if you're not active, eventually that partner is going to leave. They're going to say, this is like, so it's the same thing with anything. Yeah. Truly, you choose what you're going to engage in. And if you don't, it's going to go away. Same thing is if you're going to nurture and love the thing or the person or the money, or abuse it. Like, think about an abusive relationship. If you go beat somebody, they're not going to stick around. If you beat on your money, it's not going to stick around. If you're not respecting your money, these are universal things that apply to everything: money, relationships, your home. If you just kick holes in the wall and you set fire to the walls, it's not going to keep you warm. But if you take care of it, it's the same thing. And really asking the question, how am I doing anything in my life, is probably how you're doing everything else. And so you can start seeing the relationship with your behaviors, because they are very consistent across all the different scopes and pieces of our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was brilliant. And it is, there is still a backstory with money, that if you focus on it too much, or if you spend too much time thinking about it, you're a greedy person, or, you're whatever negative thing you want to say about yourself. But so there's still a lot of that out there. And I think people are reluctant to, if you can focus on a person, or you can focus on money, people will think, good to focus on the person, bad to focus on the money, in a way. So there's still some underlying beliefs, wherever they came from, that there's almost something wrong with spending too much time learning about money or focusing on money.
I think it's interesting, because we can become obsessed about anything, and there's a lot of people will go back to the clip out of the Bible that about loving money is bad. Well, no, it's about worshiping money more than and that's the problem. I love money. I love my money. I love money in general, because money to me is energy, and it's a creation process. And so I think people have literally tricked themselves into staying broke. And so when I hear people say, well, you're just obsessed about that. And I say, well, what I'm doing right now is building my empire. I'm building something that will last past me, that's going to impact the planet. And it's super fun. So, like, I would say that you're more, people that are criticizing that are more, they're more messed up with the way that they look at money, because they're almost hating on their money. They're making it as if it's not important. It's really important. It's kind of like people that say, money is not bad, is bad, like, or it doesn't matter. And I go, so the same thing with oxygen. Doesn't matter until you're held under the water in a pool. And then it's the only thing that matters. Same thing with money. If you just take it all away, it becomes the only thing, because you're literally going to die, because you're not going to be eating. So we have a very twisted relationship with money, and we just see a lot of we look up to people that have all these celebrities that have tons of money. But then if you go out and create stuff, and you're actually working hard, all of a sudden you're the greedy rich, and Scrooge McDuck, and all these different things that are making you somehow bad. And really, it's a question of how are we going to see it. And I just look at money as being a resource and a tool that I can do a lot of good with, and is a reflection of the good that I'm doing. So when you start to look at it that way, it's a lot healthier than how most people look at it. And quite frankly, they repel themselves. The law, the secret we were talking about, right. The law of attraction, really your reticular activator in your brain will, it sees things that you plant in there. So if you're looking at money and you're thinking about wealth and you're thinking about creating impact, then all of a sudden these opportunities like magic just showed up in your life. And it's, if you're doing the opposite, you're going to repel them. You'll literally have an opportunity sitting in your lap and you'll move right around it, because you're repelling it. You've programmed yourself. So we have to become better programmers, I think, is what I'm getting at, and make sure that we're not putting bad code into our brains.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that you can say money to me is, and you said a tool and an ally, or whatever you said, that in itself, the fact that you've clarified that in your own mind, I mean, that's, I think, a first step for people. I don't think people have a clear thought about what money is to them. I mean, they have some old programming, like you said, but, if you really can define what money is or could be to you, I think that's kind of a good starting point, because it's impressive to hear you just say money to me is this thing that is a positive, really, and why. And I don't think people have that much clarity.
They don't. And one of the great questions that everybody can ask themselves is, what would you do if you were handed $100 million after tax and it was in your account, and then like start asking that. What I find most people do is they start thinking of all the ways that they're going to give it away to people, because they don't actually have a clue what they would do with that kind of money. And then they wonder why they don't have any money. It's because you're repelling it. Your automatic answer is, I would give it to my mom. I'd give it to my dad. I'd buy my friends' houses. I would do. And that's exactly what happens with the lottery. And so why does the universe, why does God not give you all these resources? Because you already are going to repel them. Why would you, you're not a good steward. Like the talents in the Bible, that were, if you're not a good steward, you're not going to get the resources. That is exactly what happens. And it may be off for a minute, but sustainably, you've got to be a good steward. So you've got to be really thinking, what would I do with that? And then all of a sudden, when you're like, oh, well, I would do this, I would build this thing, and I would create this, and it would improve people. Then all these resources start to show up. And so you get very clear about what the outcome is. You get super committed to the thing, and then providence ensues. And then it's like magic. And then it's like FrameTec showing up 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago. This was a napkin and a dream.
Wow.
And today it's a $463 million company, because there was all these people that came together, and they said, we're on a mission to disrupt and improve humanity with housing for more people that's better quality. And so that's the obsession. And so when you have that, then it's not really a big surprise that all this money shows up and this wealth happens, because you're doing something so big and so impactful. But that's the shift that has to happen. And then it's like, oh, overnight success story that took 30 or 40 or 50 years to build up. But this is what farming is. It's like, oh, look at all the fruit and all these trees. That didn't happen there overnight. It took decades. And that's a little bit of patience and almost like an obsessive focus on being committed. That's the formula, along with building yourself into the type of person that's capable of being in that space. There's a formula to this. It's not just a mystery, and it's not just maybe it'll happen. Like, you can absolutely create it. I don't care where you're from or where you're at. There is a formula, and it is possible for anybody.
Yeah, the FrameTec, illustration is really interesting, and I think people don't necessarily, they're not able to see the progression where, you're writing an idea on a napkin to the point where it's at right now. Is there anything that you can just, illuminate a little bit on that? Because I think people love to hear that story, but, it's like, wow, what happened between the napkin and the now?
Well, what happened, what's more important is what happened before the napkin, because, all those decades of, I remember 25 years ago, I was at a conference. I was just starting. I just bought a rental house, and I talked to this guy at a conference and said, I'd love to do business with you. I'd like to borrow money. And he said, how many times have you gone bankrupt? And I said, none. He said, well, come back to me after you've lost everything a couple of times. And I thought he was crazy. And that was part of my process. And it was funny because, sort of ironic, but that did happen. It actually happened 3 times where I lost everything. One of them was about 3 months after I had that conversation with him, which is pretty wild.
Weird.
But it was like that, all the stuff that leads up to the moment where you have this magical thing that shows up. It's, if you can say, okay, I'm going to fall in love with the process, and the process is going to be a roller coaster. There is no straight line to anything at all. There's no road that's a straight line. There's no business. There's no investment. There's no financial freedom. There's no relationship that's a straight line. It's all over the place. And so you can plan. And then the most important thing is being able to adapt and being honest about whatever it is. What we tend to do is focus on what we want it to be. And you know what? The market doesn't care what you want it to be. The market is just going to be what it is. And so that, 2 years ago, we said, here's the vision, and then we're going to navigate through these twists and turns together. And when you realize, when you get to the point where you understand what a world-class team is, that's where magic happens. And it happens at the speed of light when you match it with a mission. But unfortunately, most people don't have either a mission or the right team. They just have themselves. They're trying to make some money, and they grab some people that show up that aren't going to just quit. And so when you have that mishmash, it's no wonder it's so dang hard. But this is FrameTec, and this idea can happen really for anybody that says, I'm here for more than just me. And there's a million ways that the world needs people to show up to serve and to make an impact. We need less of people saying, okay, what am I going to get? How am I going to take? I was really good at that 25 years ago, and the world didn't need it. That's why God ran over me with a Mack truck.
Yeah. Wow. This has been so great. I love this conversation. So I love that it goes so far beyond practical, sort of advice around how to get wealthy or whatever. It's just such an interesting conversation, and I hope it helps people to see how interesting the whole concept of money really is. It's an aspect of life that we don't necessarily respect, like you said, in the way that would make it more fun and make it more a nice part of our life, an ally to us, really, versus most people are in huge conflict with their money. So
there's Michelle, there's something that happens. Almost anybody can trip their way into $1 million or $2 million and really get there. You can save your way into $1 million or $2 million, but that's not really wealth. Just bumbling into it, because like I said, you're going to be very afraid. What's really interesting is if you 10x that, and I think Grant Cardone had a cool video. He talked about, look, you got to have at least $10 million. And part of that is you have to go out there and you have to get better at whatever it is you're doing, your impact, your service. And when you say, okay, it's 10 million, I think that's incredibly healthy to say, okay, well, I got to do something way bigger. Like I got to serve more than just my neighbor. I can't just mow lawns. I got to figure out how to plant forests or how to, do something. And what happens is it changes you as a human being. Like you have a deeper love for your life when you think that much bigger. I look at nature, and it's funny that humans are the only species that literally grows halfway up. If you look at a tree never stops halfway. It goes to its complete potential. Humans do this weird thing. We're like, oh, I'm good. I'm going to chill. I'm going to retire. And it's like when you love what you do, the idea of retiring, it doesn't mean you don't have really cool things and experiences and everything. But people are constantly talking about retiring and why? Because they don't love what they do. They're not in love with it. I love what I do. Retirement, what the heck would I do? I'd do this again because I love it so much and I love the people so much. And I see what the joy of having this life that matters for other people. So when you start to look at life that way, all of a sudden, it almost sort of weirdly, the 10 million, it just magically happens. And then you go way past that. But you really have to, for a lot of people, we've got to switch gears and stop saying, how am I going to get a raise? But it's really, how am I going to serve better, more, bigger, deeper, more powerfully? And who do I need to become to make that happen? And so you just constantly grow yourself and everything really changes. So the money thing, I'll say it a million times, it becomes a side effect. And you go, wow, where did all this money come from? You stop worrying about it because you're so obsessed with the thing that you're doing. It's that one caveat that there's a lot of people out there that say, well, do what you love and the money will follow. That's not true. You can't just do what you love if the market doesn't care. If you're out there saying, I'm going to do buggy whips, the market doesn't care. So it's really, how are you serving other people? And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that's not fun. I hear too often people say, well, it's not my passion. I don't love this. And I go, you're not supposed to love the thing that matters every single minute. Sometimes that crap is hard. And just get over it. Go jump in the cold plunge. That'll hurt you. And then go do the work and stop whining. And really, that's what you have to do. This whole idea of doing what you love and the money will show up, it sells a lot of books, but in reality, there's not reality.
Yeah, it's a very interesting idea as well. I was going to say use that exact same book in what I was going to say next, but it there's truth to it and there's inaccuracies to it. I mean, you're doing what you love, so you can't argue that you shouldn't do what you love, but just do what you love and the money will follow. That part is it's kind of the same as go to school, get a degree, become a whatever, and the money will follow. I mean,
100%. When you match, and one of the questions to ask is, okay, what am I good at? What do I care about? What does the market want? And when you match, there's a Venn diagram where these circles overlap. And when you find that thing where you've got those, and even when you love the thing, it doesn't mean you're not going to break an arm in the process. That sucks and it hurts and it's painful. And sometimes you have to go and you got to spend time looking at spreadsheets. Some people love that. I used to. I don't like it anymore. I don't want to just stare at spreadsheets all day. It makes me go cross-eyed and gives me a headache. So there's stuff that you've got to do. I love what I'm doing. It does not mean that every day is not hard. And it can be very painful and things go wrong. So that's the thing. I think people are just looking for the soft, easy thing. They see too much stuff on reels on social and they say, oh, I'm just going to be an insta whatever success and an influencer. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of people are because it looks like it'll just be fun all the time. It's like, okay, your life is going to be McDonald's and ice cream. And you know what? We pretty much know what's going to happen. You're going to die.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. I mean, it leaks into the whole, how to pick a career, and which I find fascinating. So we can talk about it all day long because it's really interesting stuff. But yeah, can you let people know? Either whatever you want to let them know. You have a whole bunch of books. We never even talked about them. So let people know how to read your books, find you, find out about FrameTec, whatever it is you want.
I think one of the neat things is to be able to poke around on FrameTec, whether you're curious about the project or you're like, I think I might want to invest in this. What you're going to see is you're going to see decades of all the work, what it looks like to spend millions of dollars and spend decades on personal development. That's really, FrameTec is the fruition of that. And I talk about this stuff on my show on FU, Financial Underdogs, where I go into the truth about how I see the world and some of the stuff that we're doing here and what it takes. I mean, FrameTec is not easy. Building a $500 million thing that will revolutionize one of the biggest industries that exists is no small feat. I think it's a really useful example of what's possible, and it also teaches a lot. So it'll be a basis for what people should look for when they're investing, how they should design teams. Mm-hmm. It's very real. It's very practical. And it's also kind of cool because anybody that goes, this is really cool, I want to see this, you can come to Arizona and you can walk up and you can actually see what this is coming to life. And that's an open invitation for people to come see what I think is a really good thing when we're surrounded by so much negativity and divisiveness and everything seems like it's going to hell and there's wars and then you have something that's really powerful and beautiful and we're building. So that's what I would encourage people to do. Go visit the thing that will inspire you and make you think about the things that you're here for. So visit frametech.com, tec.com, come visit us in Arizona. And if you want more of my thinking, and it's at FU, financialunderdogs.com.
Great. Thank you. I'm sorry we didn't mention, that's a podcast, right? Found on all podcast platforms? Yeah. Okay, great. I'll put that in the show notes as well. And any one of your books you want to highlight as something that you think is great reading?
It's funny. Everything that I've written about is really just me trying to figure out how I was thinking about it. I write books to clarify my understanding of things and then give people something that they can take and learn from. So I don't have any good Harry Potter. We'll leave that up to JK. But the stuff that I've written about from retirement accounts to gold and silver to how you blow up your life and reinvent yourself with a reinvented life. I think if you poke around, you'll bump into the thing that's meant for you. If any of the books are meant for you. I've just written about things that I've personally experienced. So none of this is theory. This is all launching and running 70 plus companies, many of which have gone to zero and I've learned a lot from. All that stuff ends up in these books. And so what you're doing is you're compressing timeframes. You're taking the stuff that I've learned and in an hour or two, you're going to say, oh, I got it. And you just saved 2 years of your life getting that really, what I think are very useful things that are very practical. So whatever pops up, you never really know what's going to pop up. But I think you'll bump into it and go, ooh, that's exactly the one I want. And if that's the case, then awesome. I hope you get a lot of value out of it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. So there's a lot for people to read and listen to and find out about. So thank you. And great conversation. Can't thank you enough for being here. This was inspiring, enlightening, and fantastic. So
I appreciate you having me. Thanks, Michelle.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you, listeners. We love it when you listen to the Money and You podcast, and I hope that you will every week because we show up every week. And if you want to leave us a review, 5-star rating, and share the show, that would make us very happy as well. We can continue to bring great guests like Damien onto the show. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.